I mean, if you went out the night before and drank, one or two too many cocktails, no surprise that you didn't sleep well and you woke up with a headache, right?
Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. At Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal and professional development. I'm Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer at the Center for Victory. With me today, a returning guest, a repeat offender. Loved the first podcast that I did with you and wanted you back. So thanks for being back, Dr. Gorman. So just let me introduce you and then we can get into it because now, today, I've got to go through your book. Last time I didn't have it, but I found our conversation fascinating. So I've got some things that I want to go over and maybe you can dig more into. But Dr. Gayla Gorman's a licensed acupuncturist, naturopath, and author. She helps business women manage their stress, the kind of stress that has become toxic and is threatening their superwoman status. She developed a program she referred to as um, the FAT EEG formula.
I call it's the fatigue formula, and fatigue is an acronym. So, everybody thinks of fatigue, but it's an acronym,
Yeah,
FATEG.
yeah,
So,
it is. It's fatigue. The fatigue formula, which is trademarked, to help women manage chronic stress, solve the mysteries related to their health, and prevent disease. The formula's comprehensive approach to health and resolves the problem, restoring energy by essentially rebooting the immune system. So, welcome back, Doctor.
I am excited to be here and have another deep dive chat with you, Eric.
Okay.
So,
So your
should be fun.
book again, if people don't remember, now we're going to dig into this today. You can see all
Okay.
my stickies here. We
Yeah.
probably won't get through all of them.
I
Uh,
was on an interview a couple weeks ago and she had done the same thing. She had all these like sticky notes.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I'll try to keep it as short as possible because I know we want to get out of here before 9 o'clock tonight. But it's called What's Your Kryptonite? Okay. Manage the toxic stressors threatening your superwoman status. Okay. And it's just loaded with some great stuff in here. It's actually easy to read too, by the way. Um, but one of the first things that I guess that I noticed in here, and I actually, put a big red star beside it. It's in chapter 3, and it just opens up the chapter. Uh, when a symptom shows up, get curious before getting medication. Um, what I know what you mean by that, obviously, since I've read the book. But what do you mean by that?
so from the earliest age, we have been conditioned to say symptom, whatever that symptom may be, how can I squash it? And that is some form of pain reliever. Okay. Sometimes it's Tylenol, sometimes it's acid reflux medication, sometimes it's allergy relief medication. It could even, a lot of people then think, well, I won't use over the counter medication. I'll use something natural. So then they're turning to a supplement, but using it to suppress a symptom. And so the way I explain it is that by the time a symptom shows up, your body's been managing that problem for a long time. So a symptom showing up is like a big warning sign that needs to be taken seriously. And we don't do that. We basically say, sorry, body, you got to like keep working on this and try to deal with it because I'm not gonna have any time for you. And so as we suppress symptoms, then essentially we drive the problem further and further and further into the body. More systems are affected, more symptoms start popping up, and then the slippery slope and where that leads, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean when you think about that, I don't, the part of that really resonated with me is I think, like you said, we just jump right to that. We just jump right to, hey, let's just try to medicate it, medicate it
I
away
mean,
instead.
you feel a little ache or pain, and you're like, I'll just take some pain relief medication and quiet that down. You wake up with a headache instead of taking a bit of time and saying, what did I do that caused that headache? We're like, oh gosh, I don't feel like dealing with a headache. Let me just go get some pain reliever. And they work, right? I mean, 15 minutes later, and you're like, unless it's some really extreme situation, you've quieted it down. But there's actually research now that is showing that chronic use of pain relievers
Yes.
is really creating problems with emotional intelligence.
Oh,
And
really? I didn't know that one. I thought you were
yeah,
going to tell me
and
something else.
yeah, so the other thing that was really interesting, and I'm always like curating information and then like connecting the dots because every one of these things is done in isolation. All the studies are done in isolation, and they're just looking at one particular thing. So another thing that crossed my radar this week, Alzheimer's is a huge issue, and particularly for women, it's a bigger issue for women than men actually. And so I wondered, they said that one of the things they've found that is contributing to the onset of Alzheimer's is chronic pain. And I wondered if it was really the chronic pain or it was the long-term use of the medication that was affecting our brain and like how the circuits are connecting. So anyway, you just know that if you take any pain reliever regularly, and I mean like more than once a month, then I would caution you to consider another approach.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that because I have a client who's a nephrologist, kidney doctor, and he said the
Hmm.
biggest thing that he tries to tell his patients is to get off the painkillers, especially
Hmm.
ibuprofen, and too much,
Yeah,
people constantly taking that or they're
yeah.
destroying their kidneys.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big problem. And whether it's kidneys or liver or,
All right.
any supplement that you take, your liver's got to process. So if you're taking something that you don't really need, that you're not like meeting a real deficiency, then essentially you're just putting additional stress on your liver and kidneys because,
Mm-hmm.
goes through the liver, it's got to go out the kidneys, right? So,
Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Center for Victory's podcast. My name is Caleb Kolb. I'm the Chief Adventure Officer for Center for Victory. Today, we are on the Appalachian Trail, but I want to tell you about some cool things we have coming up. Probably our coolest trip we've got is rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, north to south. We do that in one day. It's going to be October 4th to the 6th. We'll fly into Scottsdale, take a bus up to the north side of the Grand Canyon. We'll stay in a hotel there. The next morning, we'll wake up and do rim to rim of the Grand Canyon, staying in the south rim at Yavapai Lodge, and then busing back to Phoenix and flying out Sunday or Monday. So if you're interested, you can go to the Center for Victory website under Experiences tab. All the information is there. And if you're enjoying this podcast, like and subscribe. Join our tribe.
I'm going to jump to then chapter 6, so the medications and supplements, which I found again. First quote in the chapter: turn down the noise to hear the subtle messages from within. Like, what do you what do you mean by that? How can people be, what do you mean by it, and why is it so important to people, for people to do?
Um, thank you so much, Eric, for really bringing out some of these highlights from the book because these are big, important things for people to understand. And so I really appreciate that. But um, our body is sending us messages all the time. And the symptoms are a message, right? And so if we're not quieting those messages with some sort of pain reliever, and we're open to hearing what information is really there for us, we can start to unravel this. It doesn't have to be something that just is a unsolvable puzzle, right? But I encourage readers in the book, as you know, to become their own PCP, that's primary care person.
Mhm.
And part of that um, initiative, if you will, is to develop awareness and really begin to notice, um, headaches are a fairly common thing, and especially for women. And when you wake up regularly with a headache, um, there's just so much information to process to start to connect the dots of what happened that contributed to that end result. I mean, if you went out the night before and drank, one or two too many cocktails, no surprise that you didn't sleep well and you woke up with a headache, right? That's easy to say, okay, I'm not doing that again. I'm like a very light drinker, but I do enjoy a glass or two of wine from time to time. And so if I drink 2 glasses of wine or more and I have a headache the next day, I don't take a pain reliever on purpose because I want to make sure I like milked all the information out of that and to remind myself next time, like, I don't want to wake up tomorrow feeling like that. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I related when I was reading some of this because a lot with the clients that I have that might be, having some emotional issues or some mental health
Mm-hmm.
challenges or struggles is really just to every once in a while, it's okay to just sit with that pain. Like nothing's going to happen to you. Now if you've got a bone sticking out of your arm and you're
Yeah.
bleeding, yeah, let's get to the hospital. But like if you've got a headache, if you've got a backache, like why don't you just sit with it for a while? Let it come up, like whatever that might come up. Maybe it's emotional, maybe it's physical. I don't know, but when I read that, that's what I thought of. I'm like, hey, look,
Yeah.
just why don't you just get to know where it's coming from, what it might be? I always go back to, the analogy of the canary in the coal mine,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I use that analogy a lot. I don't know if you know that, but I use that analogy a lot. So
Yeah, and we might have discussed that last time, but I always think of that too, because sometimes I tend to be a little bit more aware or susceptible when things in my environment. If I start sneezing, I'm just like, okay, what's going on?
mhm.
What's in my environment? Like, how did this just start happening? It just didn't poof,
Yeah.
right? Like if I have a headache, if it hasn't been a while, but what's going on there, and when I'm feeling good, I think it's essential to do it when you're feeling good as
Yeah.
well, not just when it's bad, right?
Yeah. What have I done that, I slept really great the last few nights. What have I done or not done that's contributed to that, right?
Yeah, I think the fascinating thing about technology, I don't know how you feel about it, but I started monitoring my sleep with technology, quite a while ago, and it's amazing just changing my time up when I eat,
Mhm.
how that affects my sleep, and my heart rate variability at
Mhm.
night. I mean, tremendously. I mean, I'm talking like an hour and a half difference.
Yeah.
My heart rate dips a lot more, and I get sounder sleep when I don't eat after 6:30.
Yeah.
It is amazing. And just
Yeah.
but when you can see that.
Yeah, when I counsel people, I talk to them about early time restricted eating, which is essentially your last meal by 6 p.m. And it's even better if you can eat your last meal by 3 or 4. And the really fascinating thing, the studies have shown that for anybody who kind of likes to cheat, you've got some comfort food, you want to enjoy dessert here and there, that sort of thing. If you will do that and be done eating by 3 or 4 in the afternoon, then you can get away with a heck of a lot more. But just, and have no ill effects from it. Certainly, I don't recommend, eating half a chocolate cake or a tub of ice cream, even if you're doing it in the afternoon. But you can get away with a lot more if you really get into the habit of finishing eating earlier.
Okay, so that's going to challenge me a little bit. Uh, why back it up to 3 or 4?
So in Oriental medicine,
Mm-hmm.
um, all this information about the circadian rhythms and the body clock has been around for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taught in Oriental medicine. I'm a licensed acupuncturist and I have a master's degree in Oriental medicine and herbology. So essentially, our body, the organ systems that are primarily necessary to do the like big part of digesting, like the first sort of phases of digestion, that those organs are most active from around 7 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Mm.
And so um, everybody got used to eliminating breakfast because honestly, I don't wake up hungry either. Breakfast is an easy meal for me to skip. I really don't get hungry until about 10 or 11 in the morning. And so I tend to try to eat in about a 6 hour window from about 10 to 4. And if you can eat a couple of meals in that 10 to 4 window, it ticks a lot of boxes. And it allows you to kind of eat pretty much whatever you want within reason, and you don't have to worry about it. But generally speaking, the later we push it, the more our bodies sort of shifting into um rest and repair mode. Like our body's trying to really take care of that 2 to 3 hours it needs to get all that digestion done, like the main focus of the digestion done before it starts working on some of the other things, like the downstream things, so that by the time you should be asleep by 11. That's another thing that really some people struggle with, is to really make sure the most powerful hours for you to be sleeping, not surprisingly, the hours that most people struggle with are between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. And and that is when your gallbladder and your liver are active and those like systems in the body. And those are your most important systems for processing all the junk. And so you want to make sure that, for a good several hours before that 11 p.m. time frame, that your body has plenty of time to just wind all that stuff out of the system. So if you can do it, I'm telling you is that the research is there. The research supports it to that if you're eating a very light dinner and you're eating pretty clean and not eating things that are spiking your immune system and really creating a problem with your digestive system, then you can get away with eating later, 6 or 7. But if you're wanting to have more leeway and not have to worry about it as much, the earlier the better.
Oh, that's interesting. Appreciate the fact there. Yeah, might have to try that out.
You know what? I always remind people too. A lot of people get into the fasting lifestyle and they discover OMAD, 1 meal a day, which
Hmm.
is a very powerful way um, to um, it's convenient, it's easy once you kind of like get out of the habit of eating constantly. It's like you're just going to have one really satisfying meal a day. But the problem is that if you practice that every day for an extended period of time, your system just becomes accustomed to it and it doesn't get the hormetic stress or benefits from it. So it's really important that whatever you do, you vary it. you can even vary it and go out to dinner, have date night and go out to dinner. And if you don't eat until, 8 o'clock at night, don't worry about it. Just make sure that you go out dancing or something for a couple hours afterwards to make sure you work it off.
Yeah. Good advice. Speaking of that, I mean, I think you just talked about sleep issues, and that kind of, I think, leads into my next question or share here on chapter 8. The signal disruption. I think that chapter started with I think so some sleep issue story, but the quote there was your body whispers before it barks. Again, a little bit about what we were talking about, but what does that have to do with anything? Your body.
Well,
I mean, I'm pretty
yeah.
sure I know what it means, but like
Yeah, I mean,
for our audience.
you can think of a symptom as a bark,
Yep.
like if you golly, people eat some crazy meal that irritates their digestive system at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and then they try to go to bed a couple hours later and they have heartburn and acid reflux. And then what do? Instead of saying, oh man, I really need to eat better and I need to eat earlier, they take heartburn medication, you know? And now they've just totally messed with the stomach acid, which their whole system is dependent on to assimilate the nutrients, break down the proteins, everything that you need to nourish your blood and create energy. And you've just basically cut it off at the knees. So, when a symptom pops up, that's your body barking and saying, whoa, we need to change something here.
Yeah. Before I forget, I know I made a joke of it when I was introducing you, but I want you to go through what I call the fat EEG. I think it's funny just because what you do and you're a doctor, one, fat, helping people, get rid of that. But EEG, another medical term, but it's fatigue. So if everybody could think of it, FATEEG, can you walk people through that formula?
Yeah.
Because I think it's very
So,
helpful.
yeah. So, most of the women that I work with, and probably people you work with as well, are really struggling with chronic fatigue.
Hmm.
And that is the result of a lot of these issues that we're talking about here. So my fatigue formula program focuses on a lot of different areas that need to be addressed comprehensively
Hmm.
to provide some extra resources. The human body will heal just about anything if it's got enough energy to be able to take care of it, right? And so the F is for fuel. So we're going to identify what we're fueling our body with and try to eliminate as much toxicity as possible with those fuel sources. Um, A is what is A? Awareness, right?
Yes.
I'm like I've been working on a new so
Acronym.
the entry part of my fatigue formula is this reboot process, and I've been working
Yeah.
on that today, and so I just was drawing a blank for a minute there. So I talk about awareness a lot. That's no
Hmm.
surprise. Basically, we're going to develop awareness. That's how we're going to start to unravel all this stuff. So I have a lot of processes to help you develop awareness. And then T is for toxins.
Hmm.
I evaluate 12 categories of toxicity, and and that, you know, there's emotional toxicity, but then there's bacterial and chemical and mycotoxins and viral toxicity and chemicals, the list goes on. And so we evaluate all those categories of toxicity and what your body is struggling to manage. So toxicity is huge.
Yeah, we
And
talked a lot
that's,
about that in our
yeah.
last podcast together. Yeah.
So
Sorry to
that's
interrupt.
particularly, so the fuel is addressing the toxicity that's coming in current. Every day we're eating and we're breathing air and we're, assimilating new toxicity every day. So we're trying to lighten the daily load we're dealing with, but then the T is dealing with the stored and accumulated toxins that we got to figure out what are we really dealing with, and then come up with a targeted protocol to
Hmm.
address it. And then there's elimination. The first E is for elimination. If we mobilize toxicity and the elimination process is not working properly, then all we do is mobilize the toxicity and your body's going to store it somewhere else. And it may have stored it better the first time because maybe when it stored it the first time, it had more energy to like think through it and figure out where was the least offensive place to store it. So we've got to make sure that the process of elimination is going to get the job done. And then the second E is for energy. And so the human body is essentially a big electrical circuit, a rechargeable battery. And and so there are lots of ways that we can support our body with with electrons until our body is making electrons sufficiently on its own again. You've got to have the energy in order to be able to handle, these other processes, the, elimination, the, addressing the toxicity. And so sometimes we need to supplement with electrons, and I do that with technology. And then G is for genetics. And I cannot tell you how many women come into my clinic and I mean with some crazy disease diagnosis and some story that's heartbreaking of what they've been through to that point. And so, they share their story with me, and it's well, the doctors say that I got this thing because I had a 1 in or a 4 in 10 chance, 40% chance that this thing would happen because of my genetic makeup. And so my response, that is kind of shocking to them, is, well, why weren't you in the 60% that it didn't express? So just because you have a genetic predisposition does not mean that has to express. I don't care what percentage they say it's your likelihood is, your risk is. But we want to kind of get out in front of that and recognize the things that are sort of in your genetic predisposition and make sure that we are turning off the genes
Yes.
that may be turned on by something we're doing, lifestyle or otherwise. And then the flip side is also true. We may have a gene that is turned off that we want to turn on, and there are ways that we can do that. But the information is critical to know how to do that. And all of it requires a very targeted, sometimes it's referred to as precision medicine. So it's a pretty complex process, but I will say that there's a lot you can do just sort of DIY on your own, especially to help reduce the toxicity that's coming in on a daily basis. So,
Um, next to last question here. it's based off a quote in one of the middle of the chapters, which I find fascinating, and I wanted you to explain it to our listeners here. It says, "Happiness is a place between too little and too much." What do you mean by that? Happiness is a place between too little and too much, and just to that was in the I think it's actually in chapter 8 what we were just talking about with the signal disruption. You're talking about the excess body fat, similar to junk and attic in the basement, things like that. So that's what you were talking about, and I found that fascinating. Underlined it, circled it. I'm like, okay,
The word that comes to mind is satisfaction. And if we're constantly striving for this over the top experience of happiness, which honestly is something that really we can't even define. We all, if we've had an experience like that, we might be able to remember back to it and know it was one of those peak experiences that was like memorable, never forget it kind of thing. But if that's our goal, that we want to go from like one peak experience to another, we'll never be satisfied. We'll never really just be happy. And so we're constantly then keeping ourselves in a very stressed state, pushing, pushing, pushing. And so what that quote is saying is that if we're not growing and evolving and kind of challenging ourselves to do more, be more, then we're not happy either. We're not going to be satisfied with that sort of mediocre life. But there's also this comforting place in the middle that just makes life really juicy and fun and fulfilling without having to be just over the top stressful.
and last question that we ask a lot of our guests here because of the podcast is called Your Best Day Yet. What is what would you consider your best day yet, personally and professionally?
Yeah, so I having a just a really relaxing self-care day is something I really enjoy. And for me, that would probably look like a really long, leisurely meditation in the morning. And then I would go walk on the beach and I would probably get a massage in the afternoon and then probably have a late lunch and have my favorite food. I love risotto. Seafood risotto is like my favorite food. So yeah, doesn't that sound just like
It
delightful?
does.
What a
It does
delightful
sound
day.
delightful. It does. Very good. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah.
Thanks for the
Thanks
book
for
again.
inviting me. Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, again, the book. I work with a lot of people, but I work with a lot of women too, and I think this is be beneficial for anybody, but especially women. I see this a lot, and you've continued to open my eyes to this as some of our other guests have as too. So it's called "What's Your Kryptonite? Manage the toxic stressors threatening your superwoman status." You can reach out to Dr. Gorman as well if you want to. I would strongly suggest that. As we said last time in the last podcast, she does do remote sessions with folks, so she's open to do that. So you don't have to be in her area, so you can get in touch with her, which I would again recommend. So thanks again for being on. Thanks for listening, folks. That's all for today. If you'd like more information, you could visit our website at centerforvictory.com. And just remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. We'll see you soon.